All right, so as I was saying, I was kind of a Marxist. So I remember when I was with my ex, when she was pregnant, my friend Noah came to visit, and Noah's dad's Jewish, his mom's German, but he kind of had Marxist tendencies, but a little different than me. Um, but I remember we kind of talked about how Noah didn't like the idea that people would be like, yeah, that guy's a billionaire and he would be a billionaire no matter what. If he took his $1 billion, he'll become a billionaire again, because it's not about luck. It's not about, it's not about luck. It's not about, skill or intelligence. It's really, it's not about like skill and intelligence. It's more about luck. It's more, that's what my friend Noah and I would more think, because people say, no, it's not luck. It's about skill and intelligence. And these people are just superior people pretty much. And but as a Marxist, I wanted to think the opposite. Like, no, mainly it's social capital. If black people just had the same social capital, then they'd be just as good as whites and just as rich as whites. And it's just, racism and genetic Darwinism and social capital and luck and, and there's nothing inherently special about billionaires. So, that kind of justifies the Marxist ideas, like, take from the rich, give to the poor type of stuff. Now, I think my grandpa would say, again, if you're in the flow, you can discern. Sometimes it's appropriate to give a little bit of welfare. Sometimes it's not. You have to just look at the situations. But, I wanted to look at it more in a Marxist perspective, in a Marxist way. And that's the way my friend Noah was more like, and Noah went so far as to be like, yeah, rich people tend to be more often psychopaths. And, like the CEOs, a lot of them are more often psychopaths, and it makes people more psychopathic to be rich. And he said there's a study that shows people with nicer cars don't wait at stop signs as long. And, Peterson would be like, yeah, well, because rich people tend to be less agreeable. And he tries to kind of like justify people being rich because, it's based around their personality qualities and stuff. But, as a Marxist, I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish. I wanted black people to overtake white people in whatever means necessary. And so I wanted to think, IQ doesn't matter. It's the reason why blacks don't do so good in school is because, they're against school because they're against society. But that's because, the culture has discriminated against them, and they're degraded by the culture. So, it's if we would just give them better culture and better environments, and so I was basically a Marxist. But I think at its core, I wanted the people of color to mix with the white people, to beat the white people. So, and I kind of, when I studied the mythology, I kind of interpreted it in that way too. So I studied how, like, Zeus, he tends to be more for the northern people, and the storm gods tend to be more for the northern people, like Zeus and Indra. So, like, Indra's for the Aryans, and he's a storm god, right? But the southern people tend to be more related to sun god worship, like the Dravidians. And in Greek mythology, it'd be like Medea is more of a Turkish type of person, or more of a brown person. And she's related to the sun god. Like, she's a descendant of the sun god, Helios. And they say that Medea comes from the word medicine. And again, like I said, the sun god wants people to sin. And that's the darker races. He wants people to sin because he's kind of a Marxist, probably. Like, he wants people to steal and he wants people to kill, because in the Marxist viewpoint, it's okay to steal and kill, because stealing and killing is, you're a victim. So it's okay to steal and kill, because the people who you're stealing from and killing, they're the real oppressors. They're the real bad guys. And you're just, that's the Kali worship. And again, Kali was the wife of Shiva. And Shiva, like I said, he's related to the sun god. The sun god, Surya, tends to be on the side of Shiva more. And he tends to be against Indra, who's more on the side of Vishnu, the god of preservation, and more on the side of the Aryans. Vishnu's more on the side of the Aryans, and the storm god tends to be on the side of the Aryans, the lighter skin. Even in Egypt, you see the same thing, where Seth is a god of storms, and he's more related to northern Egyptians, and the sun god is more related to the southern, or like Horus is more related to the sun. and that's the storms versus the sun. And so yeah, so you see that with like, the Kali worshippers. That Kali is the wife of Shiva, and the Kali worshippers were black people. They were the thugs, and they would kill. They were against religion. They would kill the Aryans and stuff, and they saw that as a part of their religion. And now, but I wanted to be like, if you look at the Mahabharata, it's about the sun god, who's Karna is the son of the sun god fighting Arjuna, who's the son of the storm god. So it's about the sun versus storm. And again, that's the Aryans versus the Dravidians, the darker skin versus the lighter skin. But I wanted to be like, well, this is a metaphor of, the sun represents materiality and the storm represents, transcending materiality because it covers the sun, it covers appearances. So this is representative of the flow. And, and again, there's no formula for the flow. Like someone could be a sinner, like worship the sun god and worship, the Shukracharya, the god Venus, who's on the side of the sun god, and be a bad person, right? But they can still get in the flow. Like my grandpa said, the left-handed path, you could still get in the flow because you can get yourself in trouble and you can get in the flow. Whereas someone who's like religious, like the idol worshipers, the good guys, the Vishnu worshipers, who worship the demigods, they might seem good, like the Aryans, the white people, but they might not really be in the flow. So, because I wanted to see it that way, because I want to be like the good is bad and the bad is good, because black people tend to be more violent and more sexual, and, people of color tend to be like that, and, tattoos and more materialistic, more drugs and stuff. But I wanted to be like, yeah, well, they're actually the good guys, and the white people are actually the bad guys, because I wanted to mix the white people. And so that's the way I kind of looked at things. And so I'm like, yeah, sex isn't bad. The god Venus, Shukracharya, he's related to the ego, to sex. The sun god Surya, which is materiality, the ego. Even Kali, even the goddess, is more worshipped by the Dravidians, the darker races, because she represents more materiality, more money. And you know how like black people be like, I'm all about my money, I'm all about my paper and my sex and getting hoes, and I'm like, yeah, but Tupac is actually closer to the flow, because he can get himself in trouble and he can recognize sooner that he's not a separate self. Whereas the good guy, the Aryan, who's religious, the religious Vishnu worshippers, preservation worshippers who don't worship Shiva, the good guys, they're actually the bad guys, because they might not ever get in the flow because they're in conformity, but they don't have any impetus to get out of the conformity. And, so I wanted to overturn and uproot everything because I was a Marxist. And then, so that's the way I kind of saw things. But like I said, that came back to bite me, because my ex, she was, like I said, I liked her because she had a Dravidian, she had a little dark skinned daughter, and she, like even her daughter, she had her daughter hanging out with she had a black friend for her daughter. And I think a part of the reason why was because she said that she didn't want her daughter hanging out with this little white girl who was a very pretty white girl. And I think the reason why was because she said something like that she didn't want her to be around those types of people. And like I said, my ex had a Jewish stepdad. So, and my ex was like half Italian, half English. Her dad was English, but her Italian mom ditched him for a Jewish guy. So, I think that she was more liberal. So she wanted her daughter to be with the black girl, but I like that because I see myself as Jewish. I'm like, yeah, that's good. She's not racist. She's more closer to the flow, because she's not a white supremacist, and white supremacy is the ego, and you're stuck in the self. But again, I didn't really realize that I was not in the flow. But I told myself, being bad is closer to the flow. Bad is good and good is bad. Because I kind of misinterpreted my grandpa's teachings, right? And like I said, I saw things in the Darwinian sense, but I'll describe how I broke free of that later, after the abortion. But so, and like I said, I saw things through a Darwinian sense because, again, I was anti-religious and I saw Darwinism as anti-religious. And I think a big reason was because, people blame Jews. It's called what I call victim blaming. And I hated victim blaming. So, and they'll be like, yeah, it's because they sinned. Or my grandpa would be like, oh, because they're not in the flow. That's why you get diseases and that's why you get conquered and stuff. But I want to be like, no, it's, that's victim blaming. It's really just Darwinism, because you don't have any control over Darwinism. Like the genetics, like it's the white people have different genes, so they fight the brown people, and it's nobody's fault. It's just Darwinism. And I wanted to think I didn't want to blame the victim. I wanted to say that it's just Darwinism, and it's just natural events. And then after the fact, after the group is conquered or after the disease comes and stuff like that, then people say, oh, it was because of our sins. But I said that's just a conservative tendency in people because it helps to maintain the tribes and it helps to maintain religion, which helps to maintain the status quo. So, I wanted to uproot the status quo. I wanted to uproot religion. So, I wanted to be like, I wanted to believe in Darwinism because I wanted to believe it's just genetics. It's not your responsibility. It's genes. We don't really have control. So like I said, I wanted to have a baby. And in my mind, I'm like, hey, it's just my genes. Like I didn't take responsibility. I wasn't in the flow. I didn't see everything as one. I wasn't in discernment. And I just want to have a baby. And hey, that's just my genes. So I don't have to take responsibility. My genes want me to have sex and have a baby. And why did I want to believe it that way? My grandpa would say it's because of dualistic software. I wasn't in the flow. It's because I saw myself as Jewish and I wanted to, I wanted to adopt a form of belief that was not victim blaming. That was not right wing, I saw as right wing. So, as I said, I think that my grandpa would say my software, my way of seeing affected me in a negative way. So when I had, like I said, I got my girlfriend pregnant and I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think it's not a good idea to have a single mom pregnant. And like I said, in my mind, I wanted to look like a black guy. And I liked that she had a dark daughter. And I wanted to be like a black guy and be like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Marriage is just a social construction and I can have a baby out of wedlock. Yeah, because, I'm like a black guy. And because I always saw myself as more black. Like I said, when I saw myself as black, I played better in basketball. I would think of myself as black. And like I said, I wanted to elevate black. So I'm like, I knew that black people tend to have a lot of babies out of wedlock. So I wanted to have a baby out of wedlock and show how black I was and to elevate blackness. Like I said, I was a Shiva worshiper in a way. But my grandpa would say like, yeah, well, there is no such thing as relationships. There is no self. So there is no relationship. But again, I misinterpreted that like, yeah, so it's okay. So I can have a baby out of wedlock. But again, I misinterpreted it. But because having a baby out of wedlock also isn't the flow. Also isn't self-transcendence. That could be impulsive and it could be due to the belief in the separate self. So sometimes my grandpa would say, having baby in marriage is also a concession and it's it can be a beneficial practice as a ritual. Now there's no formula for the flow, but I was a Shiva worshiper basically, and I was anti-religious, anti-white, anti-Aryan, right? And like I said, I studied the mythologies, and I thought that I found impetus for that, and I thought I found justification and evidence. So like I said, Zeus would fight Apollo, and Apollo was more for Apollo's son was Asclepius, and he was a healing god. So back in the day, people blame disease on sin. So Apollo, the sun god, wants people to sin. He's on the side of Satan. And there's even stuff in that stuff where like the god of the morning star is on the side of is against the storm god and against Jupiter. Jupiter tends to be on the side of the storm god. The planet Jupiter, Brihaspati, he's against Venus, the god of the demons. The guru of the demons, Brihaspati, is a god of Jupiter. And I think that's because, the planet Venus rises really high, but then it falls, and so it represents arrogance. And also Mercury, the planet Mercury tends to be on the side of the storm god against the sun god. So on the side that's against him, because I think Mercury blocks the sun a little bit. And the sun, again, remember, represents materiality. So Mercury is also very tiny, so it's good. So because it represents non-materiality, ephemerality, kind of like the storm. The clouds that cover the sun. And that's why Indra is the good god, whereas the sun god's the bad god, and he's on the side of Satan. So, but I'm looking at the Greek mythology, I'm seeing the same thing, where there's always battles between the storm god and the sun god. That's a representation of the sun versus the clouds. But the storm god tends to be on the side of the lighter races, and the sun god tends to be on the side of the darker races. And that's the idea that the darker races tend to be more sinful. But, the sun god wants healing. His son is Asclepius, and in the Hindu mythology, the Ashwin twins, who are gods of healing, they're related to the sun god, and they carry the sun god's chariot, and they heal. So they want sin because they want people to sin because they can heal it. And also the Ganges River is related to healing, and that was connected to the sun god and connected to Shiva. And that's the idea that you can heal yourself through baptism in the Ganges River after you sin. So it's for sin, And but in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but the idea is, what it's trying to say is that you can follow a left-handed path and you can still be saved, but you could also be a good person, like Indra, and Indra, the storm god, and you can not be saved, like, because like I said, there's that story where Indra gets a gift and he pretends to be humble, but he's not really humble. So then Vishnu, the god of preservation, allows Shiva, the god of destruction, to take over the demigods, to take over Indra. And that's the idea that, and I think that's a Marxist idea. So that's why I was a Marxist. I'm like, yeah, it's a Marxist idea that the religious people aren't really good, but they just pretend to be good. So, but again, why did I want to believe that so bad? And why was I on the side of Shiva, on the side of destruction? Because I was against the white man. And I wanted the darker races to beat the white man because I saw myself as Jewish. So I wanted to believe. So, but like I said, this ended up backfiring because my ex, I got with my ex, and my ex was, my whole anti-white stuff backfired because she was friends with this Jewish girl, Sylvie, and Sylvie's a drug addict, and, she's very into like transvestites and, because a lot of Jews tend to be on the side of transvestites, and I would hang out with Jews and also black people and also brown people, but like Jews who are like on the side of transvestites because they're liberals and, on the side of gays and on the side of like, anything that's like anti-society, like really on the side of race mixing. A lot of Jews tend to be really into race mixing and really liking people of color and not liking white people. And that's the way, my ex was, with Sylvie, who's Jewish, because my ex, I think, had a Jewish stepdad. So, she went to that party while she's pregnant with Sylvie, and, with all these like leftist drug addicts, who are anti-society, people who are probably connected to the Chinese government and the Russian government who want to destroy America and stuff. But it's more complicated. But my point is, she had a brown daughter too, and so everything, and she cheated on me, and in her mind she's like, hey, I'm not, it doesn't, I should be able to go to parties, because in the leftist viewpoint it's like, don't be controlling. But she, it's like, it's very feminist, like Sylvie was very feminist, and it's like, no, it's not controlling, it's respectful, and you're not being respectful because she didn't respect me, and she let me know she didn't respect me. So as I said, she went to the party without me, and then as I said, she had the cerclage, and she couldn't have, so she had to be on bed rest, but but she wouldn't get in but then I got upset with her because she was supposed to be on bed rest, but she went to Kids Empire and she's moving around. So and their daughter was acting crazy, so I put her daughter outside, and then she got upset with me, and then she told me that she wouldn't. And then she told me that she would call me, or that she would talk to me the next day, but I'm trying to get a hold of her. She's supposed to be on bed rest, and she's not getting in touch with me. So that's when I went online, and I'm telling everybody, hey, my girlfriend is pregnant. She's supposed to be on bed rest. She's not getting back to me, and I'm afraid that my baby's going to die, because she said that she had to have me take care of her. And then, so as I said, my ex got a restraining order, and then she ended up getting an abortion. But before she got the abortion, I remember, I still wanted her to not hang out with Sylvie because Sylvie was a drug addict. And I remember I was texting my ex, and like I said, my whole life I was like a Marxist, anti-white, because I wanted to save the Jews, because I saw, white people as a threat to the Jews. But then when I had my ex, when I had my girlfriend pregnant, I told her, I was like, listen, sweetie, you're not Jewish. You have a Jewish stepdad, but you're not Jewish. So don't hang out with Sylvie and these Jewish girls. Because I know these Jewish girls, a lot of them are, they love black guys. They love drugs. They like, they hang out, they like anything. They're degenerate. Not all of them, but a lot of them, they like things that are anti-society. They love black guys. A lot of them, like I knew this girl, Shannon, who's a drug dealer, and she was dating black guys. And, a lot of Jewish girls love the race mix because they don't like white guys. They don't like white people, and they're leftists. So they like drugs, black guys. They're like Shiva worshipers, right? And then my ex is hanging out with them, and she just started hanging out with them, and I was like, you're not a Jewish girl, sweetie. Don't hang out with these Jewish girls. They're Satanists. So again, my whole life I was on the side. I was a Marxist Satanist, but then when it came to my ex, and you see my Marxist Satanism backfired on me because I always wanted to destroy the white race, and then my ex is basically. Then it came back to bite me. The poison I was letting out came back to bite me. I'm telling her, sweetie, stay away from these girls. Because, I wanted to save my daughter's life, but, it was poetic justice. It was my karma. I wanted to destroy the white man, and then I ended up destroying myself because then my ex is hanging out with the Satanist Jewish girls. So then, like I said, so I'm telling her, please don't hang out with these people because she's pregnant with my baby. I don't want her hanging out with these drug addict Jewish girls who they're promiscuous. But in their minds, it's free sexuality. It's Freudian because it's anti-religion and religion's for Nazis, So, but anyways, that's the way I always saw things. But then it came back to bite me, you know. I promoted leftism, but then it came back to bite me. And then, like I said, my ex got an abortion. And that came back to bite, because I was always for abortion, because I thought that people who were against abortion were Nazis. But then my ex got an abortion. So all the stuff that my karma came back to bite me. All right, so I'll continue.